G'day guys. So for today's podcast, we're going to do something a little bit different. Obviously with the change in the market over the last 12 months from boom to bust, the sort of weirdly a mini boomish thing going on at the moment.
Yeah.
Would you say? Like it's weird.
It is weird because those more affordable properties that we're looking at the moment, sort of between 480 to 700K is just in demand, right? Like we keep losing out to multiple offers and other people that are paying higher prices. So there's definitely demand in certain parts, but there's also great buying opportunities if you've got a bit of a higher budget where the prices have come back up to 15% in some places.
Yeah, so I thought we're getting hammered with so many questions on Instagram, on YouTube, through the potty at the moment, and then with all of the people that we're speaking to each week in the strategy sessions, I thought in this one, why don't we sort of answer like 15 of the most common questions we're getting at the moment, just have a bit of like rapid fire, a bit of fun and absolutely wing it. Like we haven't prepared for any of these questions. You probably haven't even read half of them. When I wrote them, I wasn't really thinking about what I was writing. I was just like taking them off Instagram and stuff.
I love it though. Like it's going to be a fun way to do it. Like this is going to come from the heart. These questions are going to come from the top of the head as well, which sometimes is the most raw and real. So let's just dive straight in. Question number one.
Awesome. So question number one, I actually got asked on a strategy session yesterday, which was like, should I look at buying my own home first or an investment? Now, I can't talk to anybody else's situation, but let's just pretend I asked you that question. Like, why did you buy investments before your own home?
Yeah, so for me, it was a pretty simple decision. I couldn't afford to buy a home where I wanted to live up here on the Sunshine Coast. So I didn't want my money just sitting in the bank doing nothing for me. So I decided to take some action and start building my property investment portfolio. And I went out and bought a property that I could afford, which ended up being down in the Brisbane market. And for me, that was the right decision because I was living at home at the time, paying like $150 or $200 per week in board. So it was much more affordable for me to stay in that living situation rather than go and buy my own home and have to pay a mortgage.
Yep.
So I went and bought an investment property. And the good thing about that one is the tenant actually paid for about 80% of the holding costs on that property. So it didn't cost me much money to hold, and that sped up the process to acquire the second property as well.
Awesome, which was again another investment.
That's exactly right. I basically rinsed and repeated the same strategy 12 months apart.
Okay, cool. I did the same thing. You know, I didn't have a plan though. Like you had a plan when you were getting started around this market for this reason, for this financial future outcome. It wasn't even on my radar to buy a home for the first two properties. So I actually bought two investments as well. And then I found out that Lisa was pregnant with our first bub about 11 years ago now, and we decided to like, well, sheesh, we need somewhere to like raise a child.
Yeah.
And so we bought a home. It was the absolute good old days after the GFC on the sunny coast. I think the first place we bought in Watala, near KFC there, as my old boss used to always give me a hard time. He's like, I'm not pulling the car up, just jump out so someone doesn't roll my like tyres, because it was a bit houso back then. Now it's a $1 million area.
Yeah.
I think we paid $310K back then, which is crazy.
But for other people, you know, I think it like a stage of life thing is huge. Like, you know, if you do have a kid and a family, like it can be difficult to live in that rental market and, you know, not have any control over your situation too much. So that stage of life is going to influence, but location as well. Like how many friends do we have in Sydney right now that are looking at buying their own home and they're staring down the barrel of a $1.2 to $1.5 million mortgage. And that's just because Sydney property prices have boomed over the last 10 years and it's sort of at the top of the cycle. But, you know, we talk to friends from the Sunshine Coast or Brisbane and it's like, well, it's much more affordable up here right now. It's in the right stage of its real estate cycle. So it depends on where you're at in life. It depends on where you're going to be buying your own home versus where you're going to be buying that investment property.
You know, I think collecting ideas from family, from friends that have done it before, from colleagues, going and talking to your accountant or a financial advisor, looking at different ideas on YouTube and then just going, well, based on all of this data collection and my intuition, this is what I think is the best for me. For me, what I do know is that owning an investment over 15 to 30 years is going to massively improve your life for the better. Sometimes it'll boom in a year, sometimes it'll bust in a year, other years will be bumpy or flat or a little bit up, a little bit down. But the averages over time are going to change your life. The example is our Oma, which is like Dutch for grandma. She bought one property with my opa on the northern beaches of Sydney and DY, for nothing, and then sold it. And selling it enabled her to have a very, very comfortable retirement in a very, very high care nursing home that she needed at that point. And then when she passed away, unfortunately, it actually literally set up all 4 of her kids that one smart decision. So I choose that. Like, I choose choices when I need them.
Yeah, exactly. And just being in it for the long term.
Yeah.
When you play with those compound growth calculators, the more years that you hold the property, it's quite fascinating how good your financial position could be in the future.
Crazy good. So the second question we got, again from a strategy session a few weeks ago for me, was when should I buy my own home? Now, I bought my own home early, so did you.
Yeah.
I believe, buy it when you want to buy it.
Buy it when you can buy it.
Buy it when you can buy it.
Yeah, and without making too many sacrifices as well.
Yeah.
You don't want to move so far away from family. You don't want to ideally move to a very low socioeconomic demographic area where there's high crime. Ideally, you want to still focus on the fundamentals, right? Like, big capital cities or big metro markets and houses in those areas as well. But yeah, I think when you can afford to get into what you're going to be happy raising a family in.
For sure. I see many, many people jumping into their own home for let's call it $1 million of debt in Sydney and Melbourne. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, interest only is $60K a year at 6%. And then they'll take 15 to 20 grand a year principal. So you're at 80 grand a year after tax. And then I know what owning a home costs and, rates, water, insurances, maintenance, electricity, upkeep, you're looking at least another 10K a year. And for some people, $1 million of debt at the wrong stage of their economic life cycle, costing them $90,000. It's not that that's the wrong decision. In fact, for most Australians, it's the best decision they can ever make, because that $1 million property, $2 million in 15 years based on a 4.8% growth rate, it changes their life. It's more, what does $90,000 of after-tax income do for you versus, potentially rent vesting like many, many people under 45 are doing in Sydney and Melbourne now, and then establishing a few properties, selling those properties, and then when you know which school you want to put the kids in, if I was doing it all again, I would have just invested in quality with a plan, and then I would have actually waited to buy my own dream home until I knew which school. Because as someone who's had to move my kids from a school to another school, it's just, until you know that point, it's all just dabbling and living where you want to live.
100%. And that's why I chose to invest first as well, because cost of living was a hell of a lot more affordable to invest instead of buying my own home. I didn't know where I wanted to be, short, medium or long term.
Yeah.
So it just made more sense financially, based on my stage of life and where I want to be in the future, to go out there and rent vest. And that meant that I didn't get to tell people that I own my own home. And I know that's, a bit of a status symbol in Australia. But if you can overcome that, keeping up with the Joneses, I guess you call it, and just focus on long-term financial security as opposed to, doing something that could really negatively affect you, especially if you're at my stage of life where if you have $1 million worth of debt and it's costing you $90,000 worth of after tax to hold that property, and then what if we go to a single income because Tay has a baby? And then that would make it very, very stressful on me as the breadwinner to, sustain that mortgage. And then unfortunately, finances is the biggest reason for breakups in the world, because it puts a lot of pressure on the relationship.
Yeah, fully. And
as morbid and as negative as that is, I know we don't like to talk about it, but it's sort of real. That's what I had to process personally.
Yeah, and it's like the last thing you want is to be living with high stress based on money.
Yeah.
For the sake of, as you said, like something that at the end of the day is really important and is a great wealth creation long-term vehicle. But really, I think something that's been cool for both of us, like I'm 13 years into my journey now, and it was only 11 years into my journey as an investor that I actually bought the first home that I really, really, really wanted to have. And it's like I sold a bunch of properties, paid a shitload of tax, and then bought the property, you know, without having to take on as much debt. And I think delaying gratification, although it's not one of the questions, I think when you mention it, it's the most important thing or habit you can learn as an investor.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Cool, bro. So the third question that I just got was, what are some tips for managing your property easier?
For me, it would be having a good team of advisors. That makes it a hell of a lot easier to manage the properties. So, you know, my property manager, local to the area where I own the properties, you know, has a lot of experience managing tenants and managing properties and leasing properties and maintaining properties. So they've been a huge asset for me. And then mortgage brokers as well. You know, when you get hit with an increased interest rate bill from the bank, just being able to go to a mortgage broker and go, hey, is there anything that we can do about this? Can we save a little bit of money? Can we do anything? So for me, certainly having the right team of advisors makes it a hell of a lot easier to hold property.
Do you want to have a conversation today, or let me just keep asking questions? Fuck it. It's a podcast, eh?
What about you? Like,
yeah. So the way that communication works is I ask a question, then you answer it. You ask a question, I answer it.
Well, I thought you were just going to roll with it and talk about your shit.
All the 15 questions for you, and then we'll just...
Ben just having a lull over here, talking shit.
Having the time of my life, eh?
But that's me personally. Like, I like to have support along this journey rather than, you know, be the kind of person that just does it all alone. I think all successful teams, all successful people, they have a good team of advisors. But like, what about you? You've been doing it for a lot longer than the average investor.
So yeah, like I suppose like absolutely team. But I think the big thing for me has been in the last few years, I've gone from a very like clunky, non-planned approach to managing to a very process-driven, simplified.
Yeah.
So I set up Microsoft to do that was number one with, you know, my property address and then like the date that the insurance is due for renewal.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I had a house, like a granny flat burned down, as you know, once.
Yeah.
And that was the point where I started to get way more serious about alerts around insurance. Because I went after that property and realised two of my others weren't insured.
And you don't get the bill shock as well. You know, when you're not prepared for it and then you've got to fork out another $1,500 to $2,000, it's like, it can feel like a big cost. And I think maintenance is the exact same there as well. Like just having a buffer for maintenance because it's constant. The other night, it was a Saturday, my property manager gave me a call and said, your hot water system has busted and we need to do a full replacement. And I'm like, okay, just go ahead and do what you need to do. After going, it's summer, he should be right to have culture. No, I'm joking.
Isn't this guy, send him the Wim Hof breathing on YouTube and just tell him to
it's good for you.
it.
But no, I replaced it and it did hurt, like a $2,500 bill to put in a new hot water system hurts, but I haven't had any maintenance requests on that property for about 18 months. Okay. The guy's a good tenant. He does a lot of the little bits and pieces that come up. So having the buffers set up as well to make sure that when those items do come up, inevitably, you can pay for it straight away without the stress.
I love that, like, because I've got the insurance set up, and then the second thing I have is like an annual maintenance alert.
Yep.
And so I'm pretty, like, just being very honest, I'm pretty bad at reading the 60-page report with photos from my property manager. I don't know about you. I don't think most investors look at it, man.
Read into the folder.
Yeah, like unread into the
That's
folder.
only because I'm going to knock down those properties in the future, though. Like the one that's a decent property, I do look through and make sure the tenants are doing the right thing. But on my properties that I'll knock down, I'm just like, you guys do whatever you want.
So on my annual maintenance-y thing, I go and I physically go through the properties once a year, and then I've got a list of things that, so for example, for me, automated, every time a tenant moves out, I get a professional bond clean, weed and feed, and a high pressure wash of the property, which means at least once every year to once every 3 years, that's occurring to keep it in better condition. Outside of that, from like a bookkeeping perspective, I've set up a really good spreadsheet. We share that spreadsheet with the handful of clients we work with each week at the end of their journey so that they can do it simply as well. And that's just a case of like each property has its own sheet in Excel, and then it's like income, expenses. I used to just put all of my receipts into like a folder for each property, and then at the end of the year, like have that stressful 5 to 6 hours of like putting them in a spreadsheet, which sucks.
Never fun.
Now I just have a bookkeeper look at my bank statement for the investment properties, and that's been very helpful to put it in monthly.
I think that's a really important thing to do to manage your portfolio easier, is get these spreadsheets, because then the more you can take out of your head and you can put into a process like To-Do or Google Sheets or something like that, then it's going to make you sleep a little bit easier at night, and you're going to know the reality. And it's like, I talk to a lot of people that get quite stressed out from maintenance and painful tenants and things like that. But if you actually track all of the numbers like that, you can clearly see if you're in a profit or a deficit. And when it might feel like it's a little bit painful, the numbers might indicate something different.
I talked to this dude, I'm not going to name names, like last week, to be honest with you, and we bought a property for this guy for $450K. We helped him build a granny flat on it. I set his expectations when he bought at $450 that it would rent for like $400, and the granny flat would rent for like $280 to $300. It's 3 years later. The property's worth $900K with the granny flat, so he's doubled his money. The granny flat's now renting for $450 a week, and his house could rent, if he wasn't living in it, for like $600, $650 a week. And he's like, this was the worst investment I've ever made. And I'm like, firstly, it's the only investment you've ever made. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, the maintenance ban, I just can't handle it. And I'm just like, dude, you've made $450,000. Your rent's literally like gone up 50% more than you expected it to. And you're worried about a hot water heater like that cost you $2,000 when you made $400K in 2 years. And this is the thing, like I get caught on that small shit too for the first probably 6 years, 7 years of my journey. And now it's like, if you want to make money for free while you sleep with leverage, then there's going to be a bit of pain. If you don't want that, go put $1 into stocks and make 7% a year compounded for life. You know what I mean? Like,
it's just no free lunches.
There's no
free lunches. And there's a reality to owning bricks and mortar, that house is a depreciating asset.
Yeah.
So over time, it's going to wear and tear. You know, air conditioners are going to break, hot water systems are going to break, grout is going to start coming apart. Like that's just what happens with time. Like, you know, look at the wrinkles on our face. You know, we didn't have them 20 years ago, but you got them now. It's like things age. That's what happens with time.
You had them about 3 months ago, and now they're gone, and I don't know what happened. There was a wedding and something.
Nurse Jody happened.
I fucking need her, eh? But in all seriousness, there's a couple of other things that we do that have been very helpful. One is I've set up one bank account. So when I had just one investment property, it was very easy to track things, but now I've got a few more. All the income goes into the one bank, all the expenses come out of the one bank, and then there's just one simple source of truth. And anything that's left over at the end of the year becomes a habit.
And if you don't have your spreadsheets, if you've got your account set up like that, it's very easy. You just print off your yearly statement and you look at what's been going out and what's been going in and where it's ended up at the end of the year, which is, technology makes it a lot easier these days, right?
So good, because like, let's say you've got a water bill and you've got 2 properties. You just, like when you pay that water bill plus the address, and then at the end of the financial year, just go through everything's in one source of truth. The coolest thing I've done recently though that's massively helped is I pay the insurances on my properties because of the experiences I've had. I just want to be on it. But for everything else, my property manager pays my rates, my water bills. She organises everything up to a $500 limit, which is on her. I don't even need to hear about it.
Yeah.
And she knows that I want 3 quotes on everything. So for me, like all of that stuff has been simple. And then I've got one last alert in my Microsoft To Do, which is an annual rent review as like a trigger. I look at the market, I message the property manager, I say, I think we can get this, normally $10 below, $15 below what I could get. And then she comes back and says yes, or a good manager should push back and go, you're dreaming. And then she knows that when the lease comes up later that year for all the properties, there's just always going to be the gradual increase versus the property manager doing it. they're just going to put it up by 10, 15, $50 a week once every few years and go, well, you know, our job's done. It's easy. We can keep the existing person without having to move them.
I love it, man. Like the last tip I would have is based on all of this, what we're getting at is we treat our property portfolio like a business.
It's a business.
We treat our team of advisors like employees. You set clear expectations, you push back, you challenge them, you make sure that you're treating that property portfolio like a business. And for a portfolio that can replace a six-figure income in the future, you know, it deserves the time and effort to be treated like that.
100%.
You know?
Man. I love that. Like, let's say you've got $1 million of property today and it's renting for, you know,
5% return or something.
50K a year.
Yeah.
In 15 years, if you look after that, based on history, it could be worth $2 million based on the 4.8% return, and the rent could be 70K a year. It's like, imagine making $1 million plus 70 grand a year of passive income for life. And all of this stuff might sound like a lot. It takes me 2 hours a year. That's it.
2 hours a year, because it's all automated now.
It's all automated. It's out of my head too, and I'm not carrying the mental load of investing either.
Exactly. Well, I'll ask you a question now to make you happy.
And I'll just rant again.
So the next one is how do you personally budget and save for buying property or paying off debt?
Cool. So I used to do it the heaps hard way.
I still probably do.
I literally had 15 different accounts at one point. Water, property one, property
no wonder you
two.
suffer from anxiety.
I know, I just made my life... There was no one was talking about this stuff online. There was no books that were any good about the detail.
No mentors at that time.
No mentors that were actually where I wanted to be. No systems that I could find that were like easy.
No technology to automate the process.
I say 15, it was probably about 8, but it was like personal, it was investing, it was car, it was whatever. Because I'd read something and that was the way to do it. And that was like watching every dollar come in, splitting it immediately between the 8 things, always knowing I had enough, and then whatever I had left over I'd save. Now it's just for like the last 10, that was the first few years. The last 10 to 11 have been decide on what I can afford to save a week and put that away before I spend $1 on anything else, including like food. And then that goes up. If my income goes up, it comes down when my income goes down, and that's it. And by doing that, some weeks it's been $50, some weeks it's been $2,000, but it's changed my life.
Yeah.
Like money is just constantly being stacked to pay off the debt on the properties or to buy the next one.
Yeah. I was a lot more strict at the beginning when I first started saving and budgeting to buy a property.
Yeah.
These days I do it a little bit differently, but I think the paying yourself first is super important at the beginning of your journey. You know, it's a recipe for success. You know, everybody that pays themselves first gets to where they want to be at some point in the future, because it's just constantly going to happen. So, you know, setting up when you get paid your wage, automatically setting a number, and then that gets transferred into your savings account or offset account or whatever account it needs to go into. But today, you know, I've set up my wage to a point where it's like my income pays for my investment properties, my lifestyle, and just some fun money every single week. And then any additional income that comes through just goes straight to savings. And so the way that I look at it now is I'll go...
That's a cool way to do it too. So hang on a sec, you're saying your base salary covers living?
Yep.
With Tay's base, and then any bonuses you receive through Pumped or whatever go to savings?
That's exactly right. Now, I can forecast what I'm expecting to earn, and I can set goals as to what I want to be earning. That's just how I operate as a person. And then I can then go, well, I look at my income and expenses in my spreadsheet and I go, well, this year with my investment properties at a 5 to 6% interest rate, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to hold these properties. Then my cost of living and my fund money is X amount of dollars, and then it's like, well, this year I'm expected to save this much money, whatever the leftover based on my income goal is going to be for that year. So then I can...
So you're very realistic with it, where I'm more like I'll spend to zero every single week on what I haven't allocated to save and invest.
Yeah.
Where you're you know, I really like your approach because it's kind of in between the OCD crazy thing that I was doing and what I'm doing now. And I think it's much more realistic. And then there's not the disappointment when there's some months in this business where we don't make a buck because the market's really shitty.
Yeah.
There's some months where I can save like good money.
Good money. Like, I'll be super honest here. Like, when I get paid, I put $400 straight to my mortgage account, and that is that one account where all bills come out of. So that's where all of my rent goes into. That's where I put in 200 and I put in 400, my partner puts in 200. Then that's our like mortgage account, and that just is self-sufficient now, fully automated.
Sick.
And then I've got a joint account, which is for like food, phone, Netflix, YouTube, all of those like fixed expenses in life.
The 30 potions you take in the morning.
Yeah, the life cycle mushrooms, the AG1, athletic greens. I bloody love them. I never felt better, so they're great. Can I get sponsored? Life cycle, please.
Simon's actually not doing pumped anymore. He's just doing affiliate clips using our channel.
But that all goes there, and then I try and keep my like personal account at about $1,500, like $1,000 to $2,000 all the time, and like I spend maybe, you know, a frugal week would be $200 a week, and just like coffee and eating out and beers and stuff.
An accidental trip to the Goldie where you drop past Kira Surf could be a week.
Or then it'll like, all the way up to like $400 or $500 in a week, and then sometimes I'll go and splurge if I've had like a good month, or I've had like, you know, if we've had a really good month in the business and I'm feeling good, I will generally do something nice for myself, like take Tay on a really nice date night, or take her away to a cabin for a weekend, or buy a new surfboard.
Get a mani-pedi or something.
I actually paid for a mani-pedi for her yesterday.
You didn't?
No, not for me.
Oh,
Look
okay,
at these things.
That's awesome, mate.
I couldn't put those feet in front of somebody. That's too
I like
too
how
brutal.
you just got it up in camera though. I couldn't do it, guys, but anyone that's been watching the last half an hour has had my tail in your face.
I feel sorry for you all. But it's like, I don't know, like I think it's just been years of thinking about budgeting and saving, and I really like setting goals and achieving goals as well. So like it's sort of become a little bit of a personal competition. A habit, yeah, but a personal competition is like, well, how much can I save?
Yeah.
And then you've got choices once you've got
Can
a good amount of savings.
I ask you a question? Because like life happens, right? Like I've got kids, 3 are in private school now. I just got my first bill for all of them, and I'm like, well, school's a bit more expensive than I thought it was going to be.
Third school in 4 years.
Yeah. Well,
public system, here we come.
Yeah, I might be putting them all back in public and just seeing where the chips lie. But no, I was just thinking like for you, life happens. You had an incredible year last year, beautiful wedding, honeymoon. As an investor, you know, with a habit of saving for so long, like how did you sort of navigate your way around that year financially? Because obviously every single dollar is going towards that, because weddings are bloody expensive and cool honeymoons are as well.
Yeah.
And so it's like you did that, and now you're sort of, okay, cool, like amazing time, the most beautiful experiences of your life, but you're back at sort of normality again.
Yeah, so the goal that I set at the beginning of last year, and the intention that I set was that I'm going to walk away this year with no additional savings.
Yeah.
So
you're setting your own expectations.
I set my expectations 9 to 12 months before that money came out of the account.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was going to have a full year of work to pay for a tax bill, an epic honeymoon, and an epic wedding. Yeah. And I got all of those things, and looking back in hindsight, best decision I ever made. To sacrifice 1 year of work to have the wedding of my dreams and the honeymoon of my dreams was the best decision that I ever made. Now that I'm back into the swing of things, I'm looking forward to saving up some money so I can renovate my home.
That's
add some value to my property.
No, I love that, man. Like I wish I said the same thing. Like my biggest expense, I always laugh, is my wife. By far. It's like, man,
I'm the opposite in our relationship.
Yeah, like, but saying that, like, you know, I did get a couple of cool surfboards recently and stuff like that.
Just a couple.
Swings, yeah, just a couple.
Where are we at? Number 5.
Number 5. So who do you have in your team of advisors?
Yep. Really
and
good.
Actually, different question first. Who did you have to start?
Yep. So I had my family. So Dad has ran a quite successful printing business in Sydney since I was probably like 11 or 12 years
21
old.
years.
Yeah. So there you go, 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
So just having, like, he's not necessarily he's an advisor. He'd be an advisor for me about life and saving and working, investing and discipline and things like that.
And what we thought were normal dinner conversations were actually just like marketing, sales, leadership, management conversations, really about. It was just like what we were both interested in, and it was what Dad liked to talk about. So
Exactly.
I think we unconsciously learned all of this stuff.
He was a very open book as well.
So open with it. Like, I know every one of his staff, their partners' names.
Yeah.
Like
what they're being paid.
Every machine that he's got from Heidelberg in Germany in his factory. He's so beautiful like that. He must have known that it would help us big time down the line.
Yeah, which is special because Dad never had a dad. So he did the best that he possibly could, and I'm so grateful for that. If you ever watch one of our podcasts.
I don't think Dad's ever seen anything we put out.
That's all right. But obviously you, my brother, so you bought your first property when I was 17 years of age.
Yeah.
So I'm still at school at this point in time, chasing girls and playing sport and not studying and not really doing anything because I'm 17. I'm just enjoying that phase of life. But then watching my big brother meet with his friends and have a beer in the spa and talk about saving and investing and the books that you're reading and talking about Jim Rohn and the stuff that you're listening to, it's like that had a huge influence on me as well at a super young age, which got me excited, but I didn't realise it for about 5 years.
It's funny because you, Davo and LT would be in that spa.
Yeah.
And like all three of you are crushing it now.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. It's funny, like that power of association.
And Johnny too, sheesh.
Yeah, and Johnny as well. And like, it's that age-old saying, like, who you spend the most time with is like what you're going to attract as well.
Yeah.
And because we spent time, but that was the beginning of my journey. So I had family, which I was, I'm very fortunate. Not everybody has that opportunity. So if you don't, you've got to seek it out. And I think trying to find people that don't suffer from the tall poppy syndrome and are open to having those discussions, not out of
ego and identity.
That's right, but out of just like giving and being a selfless person and just wanting the best for everybody.
Yeah.
You've got to really figure out your team of advisors as to what their intention and incentive is to help you.
Yeah. So like, I think I fully agree, man. Like I said this to Lisa like 14 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm like, this is crazy. But like at 23, 22, when I was starting to really get into this stuff to now, but like I felt more close to like Richard Branson after reading all of his books, or like, I know this is a dirty word, but Donald Trump's books were phenomenally, like the guy's got $1 billion worth of property assets. Like before he wanted to be a president, he was just a baller.
Yeah, and he grew up when he grew up.
Yeah.
He's just a product of his environment.
And just like the Kiyosakis and the Jim Rohns, and I'm like, I relate to these guys' ideas more than I could relate to like my best friends and stuff like that at the time. And like all of the boys have been on the journey, which has been sick as well. But it's just, passing that though, like the most important relationship as an investor, I believe, is with your accountant, with your mortgage broker.
Couldn't agree more.
I think a really good solicitor or couple of solicitors is important. And now we've gone so much further. We've got property managers,
town planners
as well. We've got tax depreciation people,
renovation specialists, handymen, all of these types of things. Because once you build a property portfolio, if you aspire to own 2 investment properties, you're going to need this team of advisors, because you're going to need a handyman that's going to take care of the maintenance items on your property if it's interstate, or if you like me and you don't know
or
the right or wrong way of a hammer.
Yeah.
And then a great property manager on top of that to make sure that they've got your best interest at the top of their mind, because that can go both ways as well, like your experiences in the Central Coast.
Yeah, like in the Central Coast, I've learned now that you need to manage your team, like you said. And I say this to everybody that I know that is like helping me sort out different parts of my life. And it's like, you can't, as much as it sucks, like, someone has to be accountable and be the shit person that's like, hey, you said you were going to do this 3 times a year and you've done it twice a year. It's like, And so just, that responsibility of like becoming financially free also comes with the responsibility of having a few extra things to do for a couple of hours a year. But I didn't have this perfect team at the start at all.
And
I had people that I chopped and changed and figured out, and I learned as much as I could. And then when I was the one asking the questions to them all the time, move on. Like Jay-Z does it best. Like him and Dash went through like a lot together, and then as soon as Jay-Z outgrew him, cut him, and someone stays at a level, the other one goes on to be a billionaire. Like that's not where I'm coming from at all. I want the simplest, tiniest little life in my life. But like, as soon as you're the one asking your accountant and bringing them ideas, then like you've got to go find another accountant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think an analogy for that is it's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be give and take, and it's got to be an even relationship. Like you are paying them for their services, and you should be getting advice. You should be getting what you expect from them.
Yeah.
And that's something that can be really important. So team of advisors is absolutely huge. And like once you get a good team, for example, last Friday night, I catch up with Paul, my mortgage broker. We chat about the market. We talk about mortgages. We talk about future plans, about our strategies that we want to implement. Paul. I've got no intention to do these projects right now, neither does he, but we are both value-aligned, like-minded, goal-oriented people, and we just get to have these really deep and meaningful conversations together. And it's like, you want to get to a point where that's what you're getting from your mortgage broker and accountant in particular, where you can have these really big picture conversations about how can I get myself and my family financially free?
The question that I asked my accountant when I caught up with him yesterday is like, you can see my whole situation. What are my blind spots? Like what can't I see that you can see? And I ask that question all the time to all of my advisors, like, what are the holes in this that can bring the whole house of cards down? And how can I get better advice and ideas to improve those holes?
Scary question to ask.
Yeah, it's like I've got the right answer, which rattled me many, many times from asking that question. Like, well, here's a fucking hole. Like, there's a huge hole there. Like, well, what can I do to fix that hole? You can do this. Fixed. Yeah. And then learn from it, improve, like move forward.
Yeah. Question number 6. What are all the costs of buying an investment property? That's a good question. A lot.
Yeah, it's a great question. So number 1 big cost is deposit. That can be paid for in cash or equity.
Yep. Anywhere from 10 to 20% or higher. Like 10 to 20 is sort of the bare minimum that the bank's going to ask for. But hey, if you've got the cash, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing stuff at the moment. You're probably talking to people too in the strategy sessions that are like, they're getting 15% deposits without lender's mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that since 2011.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, this is cool.
Yeah, a little bit of cash savings there for sure.
I like hearing that stuff because it means the banks feel like their balance sheet is better than it's been in a while because everyone made equity and people have paid off debt, and they're like, well, let's start lending a bit more, let's start leveraging.
Now, the second biggest expense would be stamp duty.
Yeah.
For sure, which can be an interesting one because your mortgage broker or bank manager should forecast that when they're going through the loan approval process.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to be an additional fee. It will be in the loan, essentially.
And there's great calculators online. My rule of thumb is if you're getting any property in Australia in pretty much any market, stamp duty in New South Wales and Victoria is much higher than other parts of the country. You can just like forecast around about 6% of the cost of the property is what you're going to pay in entry costs. So there's stamp duty in that. What else? Soliciting fees, building and pest inspections. The banks will always grab a couple of $1,000 from you if they can for like pushing the papers around and stamping the loan.
Yeah, NAB actually was giving money out for that over the last little while.
Amazing.
A couple of grand back, which helps with some of those little bits and pieces.
That's pretty cool. Like I've never got money back from the bank yet.
Yeah. So soliciting fees are going to vary depending on who you choose to work with, but could be as low as $1,000, could be as high as $5,000 depending on the deal, depending on the person that you're choosing to work with, depending where you are. So that's a significant fee. Then building and pest, same, is going to vary. You could probably get a building and pest for as little as $200-300. You could spend up to over $1,000 on a building and pest. So I think rule of thumb there is around about 500 is pretty manageable. They're sort of the bigger closing costs associated with it, but we always advise having a buffer as well. Try and keep at least $2,000 up to $10,000 up your sleeve, just in case you need to do some work to get the property ready to rent.
100%. Like for me, when I buy an investment now, I get a bond clean straight away. I get a high pressure wash of all of the external surfaces, brickwork and roof. I get the windows washed down. I get the garden or the grass weed and feeded, and I get all of the mulch and stuff in the garden tidied up.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that, on top of like smoke alarm, blind compliance, pool compliance, safety switch compliance, like it's getting fucking crazy. Is because if I hand it over in that condition, it has to come back in that condition.
Yeah.
And there's a method to my madness of like bond cleans and tidying up gardens each time a tenant rolls, and that's because I know that they have to pass it back, or I can grab a little bit of their bond and, pay someone to come and fix it.
And you generally get a better quality tenant,
Way
somebody
better.
that's house proud, somebody that cares about their living situation and wants to be in a nice, clean, beautiful home. So I think it's super beneficial to do that. Number one, they have to do it, but number two, you'll probably get a better quality tenant that'll look after the property in the way that you would want it to be looked after.
For sure. Like I think about some of the properties that I lived in uni, and I'm like, if they had have handed it to us better, they wouldn't have got it back any worse. Like I just say that, but some of these places, floorboards missing, and so you'd sweep and you just sweep all the stuff from the floor straight down the floorboard under the house and stuff. I'm like, try and close it up in winter with like some Glad wrap.
Good times.
So number seven is
seven.
What are the holding costs relating to a property?
Yeah, there you go. So holding costs, the biggest one is interest. Obviously, if you're getting a mortgage from the bank, they're going to charge a heap, and obviously they fluctuate over time. I think I saw recently that the 10-year average has been around 4.8% is what the retail rates have been.
So you've got rates at the moment from less than 2% up to like 5.5% across different properties?
Yeah, that's right, for another about 3 months, and then all of them will be coming onto the higher variable rates.
Yep, lesson learned. Next time the rates go super, super, super low, they're not going to stay there forever, and I'll fix them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, like a simple way to look at it, if you're trying to calculate an interest-only loan, you can look at however much debt you've got on the property, times it by whatever interest rate you're going to be receiving, and then it'll give you an indication as to how much interest you'll have to pay there. But it can be a pretty damn high fee if you're starting to get $500,000 to $1 million worth of debt plus.
Yeah, like 500K at 5% is 25 grand a year. So that's just a round number. 5% at $1 million is 50K a year. It's pretty easy to work it out. And then you've got the other costs, which I say is normally between $8,000 to $10,000 a year, depending on your state. But that would include management, rates, water, insurances, and about $2 grand up your sleeve in maintenance.
Yep.
That can fluctuate. I've seen properties that are very expensive to maintain that cost 25 grand a year. I've seen properties that cost $6.
Yeah,
it just depends on your council.
Or your strategy, like an Airbnb or something, is going to cost you a hell of a lot more to hold.
Yeah.
And there's way more costs on top of that as well.
Oh man, my Airbnbs, like I work out at about a total income is about 35 to 40% of the income just goes straight off the back in extra costs that you wouldn't have on a normal property. So high return, but monster costs as well. Yeah.
So if you've got a investment property with 500K debt, your total yearly expenses are going to be somewhere between about $32,000 to $34,000 per year at a 5% interest only rate.
I've been excited about this next question, number 8. This one came off Instagram recently. And anytime you guys have a question on Insta, chuck it up there, because once every now and then we'll do a video like this, or we'll just respond to you. Can't talk about financial advice, accounting, soliciting, mortgage broking, most of the cool stuff that you probably really want to know about with property, but we can talk about property, about markets, about history.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your biggest wins / biggest losses or lessons in property so far?
Yeah, I think, the biggest lesson or loss that I've made was purchasing my first 2 investment properties. This is a personal story, disclaimer. Purchasing my first 2 investment properties in my personal name with the intention to become a long-term property investor, because now I have to pay land tax on those properties, which is just an ongoing bill, which has forced me to kind of change my strategy for those properties. So I think it's just important to have the necessary discussions with your team of advisors, that being your accountant, to make sure that you're setting the properties up in the best possible way. But that is mainly a me thing because I knew that I wanted to own more than 2 investment properties. So it was just a rookie error, and I'm going to have to live with that moving forward. So that's probably the biggest loss that I've had in my last 5 years, and like a pretty big mistake on my behalf as well.
You know, the cool thing is with inflation and property values going up, they're going to have to reset these land tax thresholds around Australia, because it's fucking ridiculous to think that the average home in Sydney is 1 to 1.2 mil and the threshold's still setting at something they set in the 80s. Like, it's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
But I could rant on that for ages and I won't. So I'll move on. What do you reckon like some of the biggest wins have been for you?
The biggest wins was buying when everybody was scared. Yes. So that's the biggest wins that I've had. So rather than following the crowd or just, following what the major media outlets were indicating, I decided to do the opposite of that. So bought my first property at the end of 2018, start of 2019, and that was just after the Royal Banking Commission. Property price in Sydney and Melbourne had just dropped 15 and 12%. People were saying that property prices could drop by 30%.
It's pretty scary.
I decided to go against the grain and trust the advice from you and Phil Anderson and Warren Buffett and all of these other very experienced, non-biased investors. And
non-biased is like...
yeah. There's two sides to every coin, right?
Everyone has an interest that's an investor of the market going up over the long term.
No free lunches.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So that, but then also I bought the second property 12 months after that, super high risk, went to zero in cash, so I had no cash buffers for both of those purchases.
That was all on the line.
I literally put everything on the line there. And then...
Sold your mountain bike even, eh?
Sold the mountain bike. The $4,000 mountain bike. God, those things are expensive. And then buying my own home in May of 2020 as well, when it was a really, really negative sentiment environment. Also I wish I had enough money to be able to buy right now as well, in a similar sort of environment. But that was probably my biggest wins is being greedy when others are fearful. How about yourself? Do you want to start with losses or wins first?
I don't know, man. I just feel like everything you can imagine that could happen has happened to me. I remember one time, I was doing a subdivision in Brisbane. This just comes to mind. And I wanted this lot and I sold the other one. And then this... freak thing, the builder goes to the site for the first time in 5 or 6 months, and at the exact same time the person that I sold the other lot to had flown up from Melbourne literally to see it for the first time in a year, and the builder is putting the slab down on the wrong lot, my slab on their lot. He calls me because he's with the person. She's like, "You're doing it on my lot?" And he's like, "No, this is the plan." I didn't check the solicitor's paperwork, and the solicitor had... Obviously, they would never admit it, but they made a mistake. And that's why I've come back to this. You've got to manage your managers and you've got to check the small things.
Dot the I's, cross the T's.
I'm just so grateful for all of these lucky
That's sort of a win and a loss. The fact that they came up, imagine you already had a roof on the property or something like that.
I just have this concept of fail forward. Losses are lessons.
In hindsight.
Another one I lost in a year when I was earning $80,000 as my salary, and I'd had my first bub and my second was on the way. I got a super hot tip about this sick suburb called Kyogle in northern New South Wales, which actually is a sick suburb now.
Yeah.
It's just in from Byron and it's gone off its street.
Yeah, just wrong time.
And it's so cute, but I was greedy and I wanted to make $100,000 on top of my wage, and I went all in, and I realised very quickly after the slab went down that I'd made a big mistake, that only 6% of the people in Kyogle could even afford finance on my property, and less than 0.0% of them wanted it.
How many similar properties were there?
Almost none, because no one was dumb enough to do it. Some farmer that cut up all these blocks, and then I just was lucky enough to buy one and build on it.
Got stung.
And I lost 40K, and the worst thing was my mate was in it with me. I had just been building and buying my own home. I just finished another dual lock investment in Brisbane, like a house and granny flat in Kalanga, and I was like all in. And then I realised what I'd done, that I'd brought my mate through, and I ended up taking a 40 grand hit. He ended up taking about a 7, and I just used every single dollar that I personally had to like pay him out of my own bank account. But it just sucked. Like it was really shitty. The last big lesson was like the insurance piece. Like, make sure you've got insurance in place, guys. It's actually why I don't even do my own insurances now. I've got an insurance broker.
Yeah.
And it is like, he puts the paperwork in weeks before it's even due, and I can pay up to a month late. And it's still in place. So it's just like a safety net. But yeah, like one of my tenants apparently like burnt down my granny flat, and that was just a huge lesson. It was just a whole shit show. I'll do it in another video for a laugh for you all when you're having a beer. But like that was a good lesson too.
Yeah.
Ended up getting paid like almost 100K from the insurance company, but they trashed the joint so bad that was eaten up in like the first month of the reno.
Yeah, it's just part of the journey, right? Like you're going to stumble and fall as long as you learn from it.
Man, I love my journey now that I look back. I'm like, if you don't learn hard, how is there enough like lesson in it to remember it?
Yeah. Now, like you've had a lot of wins as a property investor as well, and I know you're a pretty humble guy, so you're probably not going to talk about many of them. But I just want to talk about, and I'm going to give you your win, when you stumbled across the long-term cycles and the timing data that you came across. Do you see that as being one of your biggest wins?
It's the biggest win ever, outside of picking up Kiyosaki's book at like 23.
Of course.
But like this book, I remember it so clearly. Like Lisa was away with the girls and I had the kids, and sometimes like I have a really bad habit when that happens once every 6 months of like going fully down the wormhole, because I can kind of get away with it without someone saying at 2 a.m. you should come to bed. And I was deep down the wormhole. I'm like, at this point, 6 or so years ago, I'm like, there is a fucking method to this madness and a pattern, and I can't see it. And I'm like, there has to be a better way. And I was like deep down the worst places of like, there's no pattern. And then I found an affiliate link to this book and went to this guy's website, and he'd looked at 250 years of American booms and busts, and it linked to Fred Harrison, who'd done 350 years. There's people that have been like knowing this cycle for more than 700 years in France. And it's like, I'm like, what? And I'm still a huge skeptic, but following it week in, week out, I'm like, why doesn't every person in the world know about it? And I've tried to do videos about it, and they get the tiniest amount of views. And I'm like, this book, The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, changed everything.
Yeah, it helps me sleep a lot better at night time as well.
99.9% of the time when people are freaking, they're freaking out at the wrong point.
Yeah.
And it means nothing. And so it's like knowing that when the stock market crashes by 30 to 60%, boom. When property prices come down 10 to 15% and it's not end of cycle, this is buying opportunity. And every great investment that you, me, clients have made, I haven't talked to a single client that we bought for at any point further than 3 years ago that hasn't made somewhere between 200 and 500K on what we bought them.
Yeah.
And it is this book, and now the way that we've like gone way further than the book, because the book's American, we've done the Australian version. Like, we know how to pick winners before they win.
Give Ben another 20 years and he'll write a book about it all as well. Hopefully.
I couldn't imagine writing something that hard. Eh?
You'd make it so much more readable though.
Just read the last chapter, FYI.
Ackle's going to redo it for us anyway over the next 12 months, so we should get that, which is going to be exciting. But the next one, interesting. We've heard a lot of great stories, but Dave has asked, is that the story?
Yeah, that's the story.
So best story you've ever heard.
Yeah.
Talk to us about Dave's story, because that is like one of the most amazing success stories. And I also want to hear.
Hammett?
No. Fitzhume. I think it's
Oh
Fitzhume.
yeah. Oh man, you got to tell Fitzhume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly say, I bumped into Dave when he came to us. He'd already bought his own home plus I think another 3 houses and built 3 granny flats in Sydney. He had never earned more than $100,000 a year in his life, and he'd been investing slowly for 25 years, raised 2 or 3 children. He engaged me as his buyer's agent because he didn't know Brisbane and he wanted to get the best home, and then we built a granny flat for him. He did a full reno on the home, which was beautiful, and then built this granny flat, and he's killing it now. But I did an interview with him, and then I recorded it, and the sound was off, and that's why we've got Sam now. Thank you so much, bro. But this dude changed my life as much as that book did, because I went, oh, everyone's got it wrong. And this guy, right, that had never earned more than 100K at the time that I met him, had almost 150 grand a year of passive income. He had a property portfolio in Sydney worth over $4 million. It would be like 6.5 now. And he was doing the Brisbane just for fun because he could, because he had so much passive income from these properties that he could just do it.
That's so good.
And I was like, at that point, I read that book and that dude came into my life within 2 weeks of each other. I had bought up to 9 properties at that point, and I sold down to 2. And I've sold both of those 2 properties now, and I've completely changed my strategy, my portfolio, and what I buy off those lessons.
It's funny how life happens like that, and people just come into your life at a certain time just to steer the ship in the right direction,
100%.
like whether it's consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah.
But that has changed it all for us, and I'd say that has become one of both of our biggest wins as well.
Yeah, man.
Like, I'd like to tell a story that I've heard just recently, actually this morning. I get a text message from one of our clients, Charlotte. Now, Charlotte's in her early 20s, from Sydney, happy-go-lucky kind of person, but quite committed to and ambitious to becoming financially free. So we talked back in 2020, 2021. We helped her develop a little bit of a strategy. We educated her on the market. At the time, she was sort of thinking about maybe buying something down in Sydney, but we told her that maybe she should focus her attention up to Brisbane. Ended up picking her up a property for about $350,000, $360,000 in South Brisbane, in a suburb where most people would write it off. But then she's just got her property revalued today, less than 2 years later, about 18 months later, and she's had a 33% increase on that investment property, which has just completely changed her life and also motivated her to become a property investor now. And that's what I think is the most amazing part of the story, is she had the discipline and the desire to sacrifice and save that deposit. She listened to the people that she got advice from. She decided to take action. She held that property. Now she's receiving some benefits from that, and now she has seen the value of property investing, and she's going to continue on this path, which means that she's going to become financially free before the age of 40. And she's also going to be able to help herself and many other people achieve their financial goals in life. And I think that's just such an amazing story to hear, of like a young woman in her early 20s that's just, strapped on her boots and gone out there and got it.
I remember all the resistance she was getting, like every one of our clients gets, because people are like, why would you pay someone to help?
Yeah, her family as well.
Why would you buy Brisbane when you live in Sydney? Like, why don't you just do what every other young person's doing and buy a 30 to 60 square metre unit anywhere in a block of 1,000 units? And it's like, you're going to come up with monster resistance throughout this whole journey. And most of the resistance isn't, I'm lucky. Like, I don't know if it's like a weird part of my personality, but what other people are doing never matters to me at all. I'm just like internally driven to like do this for me, and blinders are on. And most people that we work with are the same. They're like, I can confront the fear of these weird markets that we like help people buy into. Weird times, not weird markets. Like Brisbane's a winner. But like what I love about her property is it has still only done 5% a year on average over the last 10 years in a city that's done an average of 9.7% for the 50 years before it, and 15% a year for 30 years. And so I know, she doesn't know this yet, but her property is undervalued relative to suburbs 5Ks closer to the city by 50%. And she's probably going to get the same result in the next 5 years again. So it's like knowing those things and how to pick. We just move around Sydney, and then we moved around Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast. It is so easy to identify the hotspot without calling it the hotspot, because the data just leads you there.
Yeah.
I think just quickly talking about Fitchum, like this dude, man, as soon as I met him, like I was pretty much crying. Like I was just like, I drove around with him for a full day in Brisbane and spent a lot of time with this guy. And I'm just like, man, like my life is just so easy. He grew up in like one of the heaviest places with the worst dictators in Africa.
I think it was Sudan. I don't want to say, but yeah.
I can't remember, yeah. He basically one night decided to leave the country, and then he got caught like 4 or 5 times, and then one night he finally gets up, walks, like I don't know what the journey was, it was a long way, like 50 to 100 kilometres, finally gets across the border uncaught, gets caught by like the neighbouring country and the UN, and they stick him in one of those like makeshift camps with like 300,000 people for 2 or 3 years as like a child, like a young teenager. Finally gets a way out, an Australian visa, comes to Australia. This kid's super, super clever, could do anything. Like that was the first thing I thought about this guy. And then he pretty much tries to go to uni, can't do English well enough. So he goes, he's not only like completely looking after his entire family in Africa, sending them the money.
Because he was the only one that got out.
Yeah, his brothers and sisters got out, but they didn't get the visas. So they've been stuck in these camps for like 5 or 6 years when I met him.
This is 5, 6 years ago now.
Yeah, and so he ends up getting to Australia, moving to Acacia Ridge, which is one of the cheapest suburbs in Brisbane. It's my little favourite, because I was buying that joint at $280K, and I'm like, this is $1 million suburb. Now it's 750 to 800. I reckon I bought 150 houses there. I wish I bought one for my buddy Sal.
Yeah. David's very happy with how that suburb worked out.
But and there's a lesson there. Acacia Ridge was 280K when Sunnybank next to it was $1 million. And I'm like, I can see what the people that grew up in Brisbane can't, that this is a shithole that is going to be amazing one day. Still an up-and-comer. It's still got a lot of gentrification. But this guy decides to like pick up rubbish at Southbank and work as a taxi driver at night. He comes to us, and by this point he's saved $100,000.
Yeah.
And he's fully feeding his entire extended family back at home. And I said, can I take a photo with you and do a video? And he's like, no, because if they find out that I'm investing in my future, he's like, my family will completely disown me, because that $100,000 would change their lives.
But he's doing it for them.
All for them. And so he's like, my dream is just to buy one home, one house, one granny flat, because 50K will do it. He was living with his auntie and like 18 people in this fucking 3-bedroom house. He was so passionate about soccer, but he couldn't play because he was working so
hard.
And I just broke my heart. And he went and bought a property. He hasn't built the granny flat yet, but he will.
I think he's done downstairs though now, so it's still like 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house.
Sick. And I'm just like, if I thought to myself, if him and I can do it, then anyone can do this.
Yeah.
And it's just so inspiring. And he's the kindest, best dude that's been through such hardship.
It like sort of reminds me of the book, like A Man's Search for Meaning with Viktor Frankl, just like ultimate hardship, just something that is so foreign to us as middle or upper class Australians. And, it just gives me so much hope that like if he can do it, anyone can do it.
Oh man. It's just inspiring to see what people can do if they try. And the only thing that he did that most people that haven't did was commit.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to do it. And then he set a date, and then he saved the money and he made it happen. And I was just like, fuck, dude.
Property's doubled in value now as well.
It's doubled. He's made 350, 400K in 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
And we got to get this granny flat on, because the state government's just changed the rule and he can rent it for $400 a week.
Yeah.
I did say to him, actually, I'll give him a call.
Yeah, you should give him a call.
Yeah.
Now, the next question, we'll go on to number 10 here. What's gone wrong in your journey so far?
We sort of like did that in the biggest wins and losers, so we might skip it.
Yeah, we'll skip
unless
that.
Something you wanted to add?
I'm just trying to think of things that are worthy of talking about. And, I don't... Like, I'm a natural born optimist. I don't like to spend too much time focusing on the negative. Like, we'll always plan for the worst, but hope for the best. But because we've done that, we've been fortunate.
Yeah, I
planning for
mean,
the worst.
there's a whole bunch of luck to this thing too, right? Like,
Yeah.
the luck is like having the same brains as you guys, like actually being able to see the future but live in the present moment. The luck is like we've had an incredible 10 years since the last GFC.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, it's harder for people to get knocked straight away.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Like, some people buy at the top, you know, last time 2007, and by, you know, or in Sydney 2004, and they don't make $1 on what they bought until 2013, and
Yeah.
that sucks.
That does suck. And I think it's like important to have the right perspective, like a 30,000 foot view, just like looking down at everything. And with a bigger perspective, you can avoid making those bad mistakes and you know, put yourself in a sort of better situation. And I think like perspective is a huge thing to avoid those more challenging realities.
I think the big thing that we get is like I talk to more than 1,000 investors a year, and I hear every single thing that they do, every single story that's gone bad and every single thing that's gone right.
Yeah.
And then there's like a pattern seeking process, like constantly learning personality. That's massively helped me to put stuff in place. Like I talk to at least 2 people a year, and you would too, that bought properties in the mining hotspot that bought for 600K and they're still worth 280 grand. So it's like, guys, commodities are going off. You're going to hear a whole bunch of fucking shit talkers online talking about brand new properties in crappy mining areas. This is what's going to come in the next 4 years. People are going to make a fortune, and then they're going to lose everything like they did last time. And then the next thing you'll hear about that is how amazing it is to go buy property in America again.
Just don't buy the hype. Yeah, don't buy the hype and follow the fundamentals.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to go wrong over the long term if you follow the fundamentals. And the fundamentals is not buying a house and land package in a mining town. it's
Metro,
not that.
Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane.
Yeah.
Close to the city or the beach.
Houses, as big a land as you can afford, as close to the city or as close to the beach as you can afford. Like, thank God it's not rocket science.
So one of the questions I got asked recently, man, or honestly I get asked every single time I pick up the phone, is what's coming next? What's happening this year? So we just did another podcast on this, guys. If you want to... Kate's up. Thanks, Noe.
Kate's excited to join us.
If you want to have a look at that.
Do you want me to finish this one
off?
off?
Can you finish that
You want to play with your cat for a little while?
Stuck on the cat.
He's so cute, but he's a cat. It's called the property market predictions for 2023. So Ben and I, at the start of the year, we dive deep into the analysis and the predictions of all of the experts in the industry, and we put together a podcast on it. We just uploaded that about a week or 2 ago, so go and check it out on YouTube and have a big listen. And look, the reality is there's positive news out there, there's negative news out there, just like every single year. Depends on where you want to focus your time and attention. But yeah, who knows what's to come really, because nobody can accurately predict the future. But some bullish people and positive signs, but also some negative things happening. You know, interest rates expected to rise pretty severely this year.
Yeah, I was just reading literally this morning an update from Ray from CBA Bank, and they were saying rates have obviously just gone up. They're expected to go up again in March and again in April. And then CBA is expecting them to come down by 0.5% between September and December, and then another 0.5% in January to March next year.
So get ready for, you know, another 3 months of interest rate rises, and also just negative sentiment and tougher cash flow situation, or tougher cash flow, monthly cash flows at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those times, like, if you can't stomach a 5 to 6.5% interest rate, then it's definitely not the time to be in the market. But the cool thing about Australian banking is they won't let you in unless you can afford it anyway.
Yeah. Now, the next question was the 12th question, and it's what is the best investment you can buy versus what is the worst investment you can buy? Do you want to kick this one off?
If you guys know what the best investment is, can you let me know? Because I feel like I make above average investment choices, but not the best. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I watch Grant Cardone or Robert Kiyosaki talk about the deals that they put together. I'm like, I want in on something like that.
Yeah, I want 400% in a single year.
For me, the best investment is a simple one that gets capital growth, great cash flow, good tax benefits while the Australian government gives them, and has the ability to add some value either on the way in or on the way out. So I'm always looking for houses, metro markets, quality suburbs, close to the city and the beach, on quiet streets, in the premium pockets of the suburb, 600 square metre blocks with good quality homes. Like, that's my ultimate wish list, and I won't buy anything that doesn't tick those boxes again.
I guess it's important to recognise that 70% of the Australian property market are homeowners that want to, live in a safe community, be close proximity to good employment opportunities and education opportunities for their children, plus public transport options. So it links really closely to that. You can play on the emotions of those owner-occupiers to get a good return. And it's not about having the best investment, but it's about securing an investment that's going to enable you to achieve your short, medium and long-term goals. Because the best is tough to accurately predict. The bottom, middle or top is very, very difficult, right?
I mean, the best investment that I could buy as a 25-year-old, I could borrow $230,000, which meant Wollongong at that time or the central coast of Sydney, and really average suburbs.
Shows how old you are.
Exactly, yeah, so long ago. Man. And these places were like, the best investment generally is in the market. Like, whether you're, talking to financial advisors and going through stocks or those crypto guys or property, like whatever your vehicle is, being in the market generally, unless it's very speculative, crazy stuff, short term, is been better for everyone that's been in the market than out of it.
That's so true.
You look at the 100-year average on American or Australian stocks, 7 to 9% a year.
Yeah.
Look at the 100-year average on Australian property or American, 6 to 11%. So it's like, being in is always better than being out. But if you want to play the game the way that we do, understanding timing the tiniest bit more and knowing you'll get it wrong too.
Yeah.
Like, there's ways around this to do better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And even the worst investments in Australia over the long term have still done extremely well.
Yeah.
The things that I would tell my family and friends and close people to avoid would probably be off the plan units, off the plan townhouses to an extent, except for Dad's situation. He's doubled his money in about 8 years from buying off the plan. So
Sydney's the only place that you can buy on 2 main roads next to a train line and still double your money.
Yeah, that was pretty nuts, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense, but it happens. So that's the thing, like, Australian real estate has been such a top performing asset that everybody's won over the long term. But if you can focus on those fundamentals, get a bigger piece of land, get a house if you can afford it, avoid buying off the plan. I've heard too many horror stories from talking to thousands of investors that have bought off the plan units, townhouses or house and land packages where upon completion it got valued below what they actually paid for it years before sometimes. So yeah.
No main roads, no cemeteries. I don't buy directly onto schools personally. Like, what you would love to raise your kids in is the ultimate.
Yes.
And the things that you wouldn't tolerate personally, you shouldn't expect the market to tolerate properly either.
Yeah. Now, the next question I really like, and we've done many videos on this particular topic, which is, what are the best areas in Brisbane? Because it's a big city. Yes, it's the little sister to Sydney and Melbourne, but there's still 2.7 million people that live there. There's 5 local government areas. There's over 400 suburbs. You can buy on the beach, on the river. You can buy in elevated positions in the country. You can buy really close to the city, close to the universities and hospitals and shopping centres and all of those employment opportunities. It's a big market and it can be tough to figure out exactly where you want to buy. We have done some great videos on the 10 best suburbs in Brisbane. Highly would recommend having a look at that based on the data and the history. Do you want to talk about a few of them?
Yeah, so, Brisbane is very, very different now than it was 7 years ago, you know what I mean? And so 7 years ago, I would have said buy the CBD, buy the eastern beaches of Manly and Wynnum and just stay there, because 7 years ago, we were buying property for people for 450 to 600K in those areas.
Yeah.
But now those areas like Sydney have doubled in value. And so rather than flogging a dead horse that has a lot of its future price growth already priced into it from my perspective.
Or making that mistake of, following the crowd and
What's won
what's
will win
won.
again.
Yeah.
Recency bias is deadly in property because what's won based on like a lot of data from DSR generally doesn't win as well in the short-term future. So for me, I really, really like parts of North Brisbane still. Some of these areas have come down 100K recently and look really special again.
Yeah.
I like all of South Brisbane.
Me too.
There's suburbs down there that people like, that is the worst suburb in Australia. And I'm like, that suburb is going to make you 500K in 10 years.
Yeah.
If you knew what we knew.
Remember what people used to say about Sutherland and Liverpool in Sydney like 10, 15 years ago, and look what's happened there. Like, the proof is in the pudding, right? And it's like, you've got to just figure out what you want. Do you want to be a property investor and focus on the fundamentals and focus on the numbers and the data and the history, or emotional sentiment from the past?
Yeah, I mean, those two suburbs have the highest crime rates in Australia and they're worth $2 million still. So, no, they have improved massively.
They're still not great, the greatest areas.
All of the riffraff like us have moved to Queensland and out of those areas, so they're cleaning themselves up real quick. But
priced us out, sent us north.
Priced me out, eh? My suburb that I grew up in, which was 60 to 80% housing commission 20 years ago, has priced me out, and so all of us houses have gone north. But like, if we look at it like in seriousness, I love South, I love North. I actually like, I know this is a big no-no, but Western Brisbane looks phenomenal. Some suburbs out there have grown as little as 3% per annum for the last 10 years, but have averaged nearly 9% for 50. So like Western Sydney, it took a while for that to come through. Like, the beaches and the city went ballistic after the last GFC. But I can't afford a $2 million house in some of those suburbs, and many people can't. So something that was 30, 40 Ks in the city or 20 Ks in the city that looked a lot worse now looks a lot better to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, it depends on your budget, right? Like, that's what's really going to dictate the best parts of Brisbane. If you can only afford a $500,000 property right now, then we absolutely love the look of South and West Brisbane. Like, there's so much value. But if you've got a budget of, say, $800,000 or $900,000, then closer to the city or closer to the beaches, there's some really good deals right now. Even the Sunshine Coast, to an extent, has some good deals around that price point.
I've watched some of the inner city pockets. Like, an example would be like Kedron, 7 Ks in the city, Wavell Heights, 10 Ks. And then you could go directly next to it at Stafford or Everton Park or Everton Hills or Runner Hills. And just one example, like Wavell Heights has gone from 700K to 1.4 mil, or from 1.5 for a nice joint to 3. And then directly next to it, like, I'm talking next to it, like, the same suburb has gone up by a fraction of the price point. And so there's still a lot of, in that middle city ring, like, great potential. And then I love the northern beaches and southern beaches at the moment too. Like, if you're looking for undervalued beachside stock, like there's about, what do you reckon, 14 suburbs between all of the beachside suburbs that just look amazing.
Yeah.
That I'll absolutely regret not buying this year or in the next few years, really, by the time the Olympics come through.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. So much infrastructure, so much gentrification, a lot of redevelopment happening as well, knockdown rebuilds, renovations. Amazing school districts, some of the best schools in Queensland around these areas as well. And it's just nice to see the government committing and getting a lot of these infrastructure projects started, because, one of the slogans for the Olympics is to connect Southeast Queensland. So, you've got a lot of these redevelopments, train stations being upgraded, train lines being added, major arterial roads getting widened and adding new ones as well. Upgrades to stadiums, shopping centres, lifestyle areas and things like that. It's really nice to see, and all of that infrastructure spending is going to just improve the quality of Brisbane and make it a more livable and desirable city for more and more people, because the ABS expects there to be over 5 million people living in Brisbane within the next sort of 20 years.
Insane.
Now, question 14 is, what's better, to buy a house or to buy a unit?
I don't know, because I'm assuming there's like units in Sydney that have smashed the performance of units in Canberra or houses in Canberra, for example. don't quote me on that. That came off really bad. But there are units that have done better than houses in certain locations. But on average, you know the data better than I do.
Yeah.
Houses have statistically smashed the performance of units in Australia. And so for me, always houses, because I don't back myself to pick that one suburb where units did better in Sydney over a house in Brizzy. I just want to play the averages and not have to pick the needle out of the haystack.
Yeah, like Australia-wide, if you look at the comparison between houses versus units over the last 25 years, the difference has been 96%.
Wow.
That's substantial. If you add an extra 5 years to that, it's been 140% different.
According to CoreLogic, hey, so they're like the data dudes.
That's, yeah, the CoreLogic. So that's a lot of money. Plus you always hear about people talking, the power is in the land. You know, Fred Harrison wrote an amazing book on that. And it's so true. Like all the economic gains in society end up back in the land values. What's sitting on top of that is actually a depreciating asset. So, you know, you don't want to buy the house, you want to buy the better location, the better piece of land. So we always align with that more so. But it's not so much just on the statistics, like that is obviously a huge part of it, but just your value add potential. You know, if you've got a 2-bed, 2-bathroom unit, you can't do much with that. But if you've got a 3-bed, 1-bathroom house on a 600 square metre block, it's almost limitless potential there. You can knock down, rebuild, add bedrooms or bathrooms, do cosmetic upgrades, potentially add granny flats, potentially subdivide.
Yeah.
There's so many more options, and that's what you want as an investor. You want options in the future.
Yeah, I remember my first property, and we're not bagging people with units. We're certainly not saying you should do anything
No, you
about
bought
them.
units.
You know, my unit was cool. I was in a big block, and I did gut it and renovate it, and it was nice. But then there was nothing else that I could do there.
Mum doubled her money in 4 years on a unit in Cronulla as well. Like they work. It's just we've got preferences.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's like if you want best practice, here's what that looks like type vibe.
Yeah.
The last question, the 15th one we got was just Sydney versus Melbourne versus Brisbane versus Perth versus Canberra, Adelaide, Darwin, whatever. There is constantly conversations, especially on the forums and online, about what is the best. And all of those conversations revolve around a hotspotting, short-term recency bias perspective and have nothing to do with true fundamentals. So for me, I always go Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. I haven't done Melbourne yet, but I look forward to hopefully owning something down at St Kilda one day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, like I looked at the Homely data over 46 years, and then you can add the last 4 years and it looks the same. You know, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane have all averaged, when you take the total return divided by the years, 9.5% per year. It's insane.
Yeah.
And then knowing that the ABS says 75% of Australia's population, job, income growth is going to be between Melbourne and the sunny coast. It's like, I'm not a betting man, but if I can roll and get a 3 out of 4 likelihood of like pulling the right area, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, and what we've been able to do is overlay that 46 years worth of history to the 18-year cycle, and what it actually indicates is that Sydney and Melbourne run on a very similar cycle, around about, they almost double in value in the first half of the real estate cycle, and that's happened for at least the last 2 cycles. Then you've got your Brisbanes and Perths, which do extremely well in the second half of that real estate cycle where we're at right now. Now, if I know I can double my money every 10 years in either one of those markets, you know, I'm just going to be focusing my attention on the one that represents the most value right now, which, you know, based on the research we've been doing, has been Brisbane. And then once it's run its course, then it's going to be likely that there's going to be amazing opportunities back down in Sydney and Melbourne again. So we'll be focusing our attention just down there. And, you know, for me, it's about supply and demand. And when you've got the highest number of people living there, plus the highest number of people moving to those locations, they're also earning the most money in those areas. They're paying the most tax. So the government's bringing the best infrastructure to those regions, adding more value to it. Plus the employment opportunities on top of that as well, not just being reliant on one industry, being reliant on a number of different industries as well. Yep. It's just a method to the madness. And, you know, I know, as we've said, all areas, all assets have done really well in the past. It's just trying to develop your own belief system and develop your own strategy and then hopefully go out there and make the right decision.
You know, as people that grew up in Sydney, I've got a very, very, very strong Sydney bias.
Yeah.
Because you just fly over the city or you spend any time on the bays in the city and it's like, I've been to a lot of cities around the world. Like, I don't know anywhere that's as beautiful as Sydney personally. Like,
Nah.
it is phenomenal. It's magic. It's so beautiful. And I was watching like a documentary series on Japan recently, and they did like a flyover of Tokyo, which you've been, hey?
Yeah. I've done it.
You know, while there are houses in Sydney at Rose Bay and Vaucluse and stuff that are, you know, maybe those suburbs are the wrong ones because they'll be heritage listed and no one will be able to touch them forever. But while there's suburbs within 5Ks of the city that don't have somewhere between a 10 to 30 story building on them, you know, people, until I saw that documentary, I was like, Sydney is overpriced. And I'm like, Sydney is the most undervalued city out of London, Tokyo, Beijing,
New York,
LA by far,
Chicago.
because it is still allowing people to trade in individual residential lots within 2 to 5Ks of the city for under $2 million. It's insane.
Look at Surrey Hills. You
Yeah.
can still see a little 3-bed, 2-bathroom, 4-metre frontage terrace homes in Surrey Hills. Like
Yeah.
there's so much development to occur. We're such an infant country.
Yeah.
25 million people in one of the biggest land masses in the world, one of the biggest continents in the world. It's just got such a long ways to go, which makes me super excited for the future. I think Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth are all going to continue to do extremely well in the long-term future. I'm going to hedge my money in Brisbane and Sydney mostly.
Yeah, me too. And I think the last thing I wanted to finish on, in the second half of the last real estate cycle between 2002 and 2008, every single capital city in Australia went up over 120%, except Sydney and Melbourne. I think Sydney or Melbourne, one
40.
did 60 and one did 30 or 40%.
Yeah.
And so interest rates during that same period went up more than 20 times.
Yep, 22 times.
You know, so I just want people to understand that this isn't our first lap around the sun. Everything has already previously happened, and we can just, as Phil says, like, remember the future.
Yeah, remember
we can't
the future.
never predict it, but we can look at what's happened. And Simon and I have looked at the last 3 real estate cycles, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And that is second half of cycle, exactly what you said, Brisbane. First half of cycle, Sydney, Melbourne. And this really doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
No, and get curious with it as well. Like, you know, don't just take it at face value when you see an article or you see a headline, or if, you know, one of your colleagues or one of your family members tells you something. Like, don't just take it at face value. Like, get curious, do the research, dive a little bit deeper, because when you do, you realize that these things have happened in the past and there is comparable times in history that link to what we're going through right now, which can help you make a more educated decision and can help you focus on what you want to actually achieve, which for me, financial freedom, I'm hell-bent on working towards that in the long-term future. If I do nothing, nothing's going to change. But if I like really zone in and focus, there's so much potential out there.
You know, and what I love about all of this, guys, is like, it is a marathon to get to financial freedom, but I do it in sprints. So I'm either doing one of 3 things all the time. I'm either paying off debt, which is where I spend 99.9% of my journey in the last 13 years, or I am saving a deposit, which is where I've spent the other like 1%, or I'm buying something, which I wish lasted longer, but it's really just snippets of that. And so as I'm getting closer to buying, that's when like the stress levels go up a little bit. That's when the strategy comes into place. That's when I think about the future. That's when I like really look at my like, this is the ideal property list and go for that. And then I buy it, and then I just get back to my normal life and enjoy that. And that's what we hope you guys get from us over time, which is just, you can be financially free, you can be an investor, but just have the sickest time doing it all the way through, because just in case you don't get a long life, or just in case something does happen that changes things, like we want to enjoy every single moment of it. You know, have that little bit that you pay yourself first, and then a lot of it to spray on lifestyle. And then hopefully once you're financially free, you know, not everybody in the world is trying to like get more. Not every single person that's like moving towards wealth and financial freedom is like a Bezos that just wants to be the dude. Like, a lot of people want to help. A lot of people want to contribute. A lot of people want to find purpose and meaning and connection. And I hope as you get to financial freedom, you pay it back, you help other people. Like, we've been able to create incredible relationships with a local charity now. I think we've given $41,000 now to that, like a bunch of charities, which is insane. And our intention is to continue to do that. Like, I was living off 20 grand a year, you know, not that long ago, and now I can give $20,000 a year to a local charity, and that's what we want. Like, we want to see the world get better as more people realise financial independence, not worse.
And I'm so fortunate to talk with anywhere from 12 to 14 new investors every single week, and then about another 3 to 6 previous clients every single week. And what fills my heart and fills my cup so much is the fact that every single one of the people that I talk to has that intention to become financially free, to give back.
Yeah.
And let's spread that message of kindness, that message of selflessness. And I think we're all doing ourselves a disservice to not challenge ourselves and become the best version of ourselves, so that then we can mentor and help other people become the best versions of themselves, and just promote a better lifestyle, a better way of living, a better way of operating, because it's an awesome experience being a human. And, like, you know, living here, it's so beautiful. Like, you know, let's make the most of it and spread the word. So we just encourage every single person to reach out, to send us an email at info@pumpedonproperty.com and send us through some questions you'd like us to answer, or some content ideas that you would like to hear. Let's build a community where we're sort of working together to teach each other a little bit more and become better versions of ourselves. That's what we really want at the end of the day.
You know, if you are following this on YouTube, please give it a thumbs up if you've got this far. You know, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're listening to it on the app through one of the podcasts, then please give it a 5-star review. That would help other people find it, because at the moment, you know, there's algorithms and stuff that I don't understand, but I know that this stuff really helps us. I just wanted to say we really want the best for you and wish you all the best, and hope that we can become part of that informal team of advisors around you that just gives you some ideas that you take with other ideas that you're learning and applying into your own life to make it better in the future.
Whew, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice. Oh.